Okay, we're live. We're here in the state of clean energy. Marco Mangelsdorf and me. Marco is from Provision Solar, joins us by telephone from his company office in Hilo, Hawaii, that is Provision Solar. He's just back from China, so we are happy to see him back and healthy and ready for a continuation of our ongoing discussion about the state of clean energy. Welcome back to the show, Marco.
Well, and happy Aloha Monday to you, my good friend Jay.
Let's talk about what we're going to talk about. I guess the principal thing that we're going to talk about is going off the grid, because there's been, stuff in the paper about that, and there was some discussion at the economics conference about it, I think. And, we ought to address that and see what people are saying about it and what it means. So that's the principal topic. And then we'll also talk about our interview with the very new CEO of Hawaiian Electric, that is Alan Oshima, and your reactions to that and what it looks like going forward with the new CEO. And finally, we should talk about the latest solar data, which we always like to talk about. So this is, there's a lot of things. I also want to mention, Marco, if you give me a moment, I want to mention that on the 14th of this month, that's next Tuesday, a week and 1 day away, the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum plus ThinkTech plus Blue Planet Foundation are presenting a gubernatorial forum on energy policy featuring all of the candidates. That is David Ige and Duke Iona and Mufi Hanneman and Jeff Davis, the whole lot, to talk about and answer questions about energy policy in Hawaii. So that'll be at Laniakea. If anybody wants to sign up, they should take a look at thinktechhawaii.com. And Marco, we may actually do audio broadcast on that for the neighbor islands. And in any event, KITV is going to be taking video of all of it and putting it on television on the 22nd, I think, of October. So that'll be available to everyone that way too. But putting that aside and moving on to the principal topic of the show, I guess let's talk about Alan Oshima first. You were able to see that on YouTube. We were happy to have him here on the very day that he started. I was ebullient to have him in our studio. He's an old friend, and he seems very promising. But what are your reactions?
I thought he did a very solid job of introducing himself as the first day of his position there of CEO of Hawaiian Electric Company, and spoke with passion and conviction about where he sees the company right now and where he thinks it needs to go. I think he said pretty much all the right things, and I wanted to share with you kind of some of the key words that struck me. The first key word, which came fairly early in the interview with him, was the word trust. I found it notable that that was one of the first kind of substantive answers that he gave. And what I'm referring to is, by him bringing up the word trust, that implied to me that he recognizes that there is a lack of adequate trust between Hawaiian Electric customers and the utility company, and that there is a need to put for Hawaiian Electric to put more time, energy, and effort into building a greater trust between the utility company and its customers, its ratepayers. And perhaps, you could expand that as well as far as trust between the utility company and legislators, or trust between the utility company and the PUC commissioners. So not just utility ratepayers, but kind of across the board. So I found that notable. Again, recognizing that that's something that's lacking right now, and the need to rebuild trust. Another couple words that I picked up on was the word rebuild, which kind of falls in line as well with trust, that the need to rebuild relationships between Hawaiian Electric and the other players in the energy field. And then the final word I picked up on was transform. Transform what the utility company has been doing into some type of new, kind of where no utility company has gone before, model as far as what their product offerings are, what their services are, and no longer playing the role essentially of a generation and transmission company, but something new, some type of hybrid model where they'll be offering something more in terms of services and products than they have been up until now. So he's got his work cut out for him, to say the least, because any type of large bureaucracy, especially one that typically is as conservative as any utility company, is going to be a real challenge to be able to change course. And interestingly, he used the kind of the analogy between between a speedboat and between a much larger ship. And if I remember correctly, he likened Hawaiian Electric to being a speedboat, which I found kind of interesting if I got his analogy correct, because utility companies are anything but speedy. Typically, they're more like huge cruise liners that takes quite a bit of effort to change course. So those are kind of my initial impressions from for your half hour with Alan.
Now, yeah, that makes me think of a bunch of things. My reactions. I'll give you my reactions. You know, I think he was a really good choice for them. I think we really needed to have we do need to have a local CEO. The other thing about Alan is he's very practical. He's a lawyer, been practicing in this community for a long time with good firms. He's been a utilities lawyer, a PUC lawyer. He had a lot to do, as he discussed, with rolling out the cell phone technology in Hawaii. I mean, in many ways, he's a hero for that. He made it happen. And he sat on the Hawaiian Telecom board. He talked about that too. And in a way, he kept them in business, you know. He definitely understands about how utilities need to function in this state. And he's been with HEI, the parent company to Hawaiian Electric, for some time, working with Connie Lau. And, he's not unfamiliar with all the processes that we read about and talk about. He's no stranger to all of these things that you and I have followed and the industry has followed. And I think he has the right idea to actually expand Hawaiian Electric's, activities, including expand those activities to the generation of clean energy. I mean, it's out-of-the-box thinking. And I'm really, really hopeful that the press, and for that matter, the legal structures around Hawaiian Electric will give him a honeymoon to roll out and to advocate for his new deal, his new version of the transformation. But I think, as far as I'm concerned, I really think that he's in the right place, the right person, with the right ideas, the right comprehensive understanding of things, to do a remarkable job. He's a soft-spoken, understated guy, but I think he's in the right place to do a remarkable job and change things around. Not only in the relationship of the company, the trust relationship, building trust, but in the technology and in the utility offerings to the public. That will take us a lot further, a lot faster than we've been moving so far. I guess I would call it leadership. I think that's what we have with Alan Oshima. How much of that do you agree with?
Well, he certainly came across, and he implied that he was going to be an agent of change.
Yes.
And I think anyone who's interested in moving forward at a more rapid clip in terms of adopting renewables into the electricity generation portfolio of the service territories that HEI has, that we can only support that. So, I mean, he said certainly the right words. I mean, I can tell you without really, I think, divulging too much, that I'm well aware that over the past 14 years plus that I've been doing PV here in the state pretty much exclusively, that I have known of various efforts and talks and discussions and intent that Hawaiian Electric has had over these past 14 years to get into ownership of PV assets, and to whether it's for utility scale solar or whether it's rooftop based solar. So there have been numerous efforts on Hawaiian Electric's part in terms of looking at how can we do something differently? How can we actually be in the business of if owning solar and selling solar, again, whether utility scale or rooftop. And 14 plus years into it, as far as I know, none of those efforts has really paid out in terms of come to fruition as far as actual kilowatts or megawatts installed on people's roofs. So it would be interesting to see whether Mr. Oshima moves in that direction in terms of changing the business model. Another thing that struck me that I would have liked to have heard him address. I mean, it's all well and good to talk about where things will be or where they want to be, where we collectively want to be in 16 years, in 2030. But it's just as important, in fact, much more important to me and people in my business to have a sense of where things are going to be in the next 6, 12, 24 months. And I would have liked to have heard what he had to say regarding the 4,500 and growing number of ratepayers, customers on Oahu who are effectively waiting, sometimes patiently and sometimes not so patiently, for an answer to why they are not able to install a photovoltaic system on their roof for an indefinite amount of time. I think that's, and I'm not saying that there's any type of quick fix out there or easy answer. In fact, I feel just the opposite. There is no quick fix. There is no easy answer, but it would have been useful to have him, and I hope he will in the days and weeks to come, address more short-term, near-term priorities and issues, such as this growing number of very unhappy people who want to go PV but are effectively being told no can't right now.
You know, I think what I heard him say was that in order to do that, you got to work on the grid, and he's going to work on the grid so as to make that happen. And I agree with that. I think you do too. That you got to get by the technical issues, the technological issues, and then this isn't a problem anymore. And that means better efficiency on the grid. It means storage on the grid, and I think he's very akamai about those things. So as you said, he presents as a change agent who knows the territory, who knows the way the company works, who knows where the company may be a little stuck, and has the familiarity with all of it to actually make it happen, make it change. And that's going to be one to watch. It's going to be that old tension between we got to keep the lights on, we got to be conservative and safe about what we do so that nobody has a blackout or a brownout or anything. On the other hand, we've got to move forward with new technologies and maybe take some risks in order to get down the road. This is a guy who could actually figure that out. That's what I think. So we'll all be watching him, and I'm rooting for him. I told him that. So let's see what happens. Let's move on, though. You have more?
No, go ahead.
Let's move on to a segue that comes out of your discussion over those 4,500 people. I mean, more and more, it seems like there are people out there that are suggesting or actually doing the act of disconnecting with the grid in order to avoid all this interconnect issue. And as I recall, it's been happening on the neighbor islands, but not so much on Oahu. Now it seems to be happening on Oahu. Can you give us an update on that, Marco?
Well, it was a very interesting piece in yesterday's Star Advertiser by the relatively new Energy Beat reporter, Catherine McLessis, looking at the, I don't know if I'd call it the off-grid phenomenon, because I don't feel it's a phenomenon, at least quite yet, but it was an interesting look at one individual and his brother, I believe it was, who have a home that they decided to make completely off the grid, and relaying their experiences about that. And Catherine also interviewed a number of people in the PV industry, and it's something that I think is kind of appealing on paper, because I mean, especially for those homeowners who want to go PV and are being told that they can't do it anytime in the near future to say, well, the heck with that, I'll just disconnect from the grid and I'll go off grid. But my position is that wanting to disconnect from the grid and have your own independent power system, while it certainly has a lot of appeal to it, that the reality is that the very, very, very large majority, vast majority, I would say, of utility customers, whether it's here in Hawaii or in California or anywhere else in the mainland or the world practically for that matter, when it comes to the ability to and the true willingness to put the time, effort, and energy into adopting an off-grid lifestyle, I feel that the vast majority of people just aren't willing and able to do that. We want to turn the power on when we want it for our appliances or our home entertainment centers, and the idea of having to maintain battery voltage and do battery maintenance and do equalization charges from a generator and all that stuff, I mean, it is a very different lifestyle. And whenever I read quotes from people talking about how off-grid makes so much sense and based on the levelized cost of energy and so-called grid parity and all these other buzz phrases that the people in my industry are so fond of putting out there, that these folks, I'm willing to bet, probably haven't spent any time at all, maybe not even an hour or two, let alone a day or 2 week or month, actually living off the grid and knowing what that entails. Because it's my position, like I said, that off-grid living is something that very large majority of people want nothing to do with. So, but there's reason for debate out there. There's cause for debate, difference of opinions. But I just don't feel that there's going to be any kind of mass exodus anytime in the foreseeable future from the grid. I just don't see that happening. And I have a lot of respect for Representative Cynthia Thielen, but I mean, she was quoted in that piece as saying, well, that Hawaiian Electric essentially may be going out of business not too long from now because they just can't get it together, and then you're going to have all this mass defection from the utility grid, and I just don't think that's in the cards.
Yeah. Let's take a short break, and then we come back and explore that further and perhaps in drill down detail about what it means to stay on, what it means to stay off, and what it means to wait. That's Marco Mangelsdorf, Provision Solar, joining us by Skype audio from Hilo, Hawaii. Just back from China here in the state of clean energy. We're talking about at least principally going off the grid. We'll be right back.
Aloha, this is Keli'i Akina. It's my privilege to be the host of Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. Ehana Kako, what does that mean? Well, many people have heard of Epule Kako, let's pray together. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Let's work together to build a better economy, government, and society. And every week, Monday, from 2 to 3 o'clock, you will see movers and shakers and other people who are working together to build a better economy, government, and society. Again, I'm Keli'i Akina on the Ehana Kako weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. Aloha. See you here Mondays, 2 to 3.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Marco Mangelsdorf of Provision Solar. Joins us by Skype audio from Hilo. We're talking about the state of clean energy, of course. We're talking about today going off the grid. So, Marco, there's been criticism of PV in general, to say that the guys who can afford PV make it hard for the guys who can't afford PV. And if you just pay a modest connection charge, then you really, it's unfair in the sense that the other guys who can't go off PV, who can't afford PV, they have to pay the cost of maintaining the grid. And over time, as more people go on PV, more people interconnect, then the other guys are going to have to pay relatively more to keep the grid going. Well, this makes it, the possibility of going completely off and having batteries and whatnot. A, it's more of the same because it costs a lot more now to add the batteries, and B, it's more of the same in terms of laying the burden of maintaining the grid on the guys who can't afford to have PV or batteries. So, I mean, is that a factor? Where does that fit in this whole kind of expectation going forward about people getting off the grid?
I don't have a clean, juicy answer for you on that, Jay. Let me take that on this way. I mean, in the document dump that Hawaiian Electric provided to the PUC at the end of August, they essentially made a pretty convincing case, in my opinion, that the net energy metering as it stands now just should not continue in its present form. That it is for a number of reasons unfair to those ratepayers who are not able to and will never take advantage of net energy metering. So there needs to be a reapportionment of the costs, and I think that's inevitable, although it's far too early to say what that reapportionment will be once the PUC comes up with a decision in order, whether, however long that is from now. In terms of the impact that going off the grid will have, I just don't think I think it's going to be infinitesimal at this point in terms of, like I said, the strong unlikelihood of some type of mass exodus from the grid, whether from homeowners or from business owners. So I don't think that's going to play that big a role. Again, there's room for debate on this subject, because some colleagues of mine who I have a lot of respect for, feel otherwise. That a number of factors are in fact will be pushing more and more people to disconnect completely. Another kind of interesting twist is a PV system design, which I know there's been a lot of buzz about and discussion about. That's called essentially a non-export design, which means that any surplus power that is produced beyond meeting certain critical loads in the home, that surplus power does not get fed back into the house distribution system, and therefore does not get fed back into the utility company. And that's something that a number of companies have been pursuing with great gusto. To what extent they're actually being installed, these non-export systems that are in fact kind of grid-tied, but not really, only grid-tied in the sense of power flowing one direction, but not bidirectionally. That's something that I think
actually, that's an elegant solution. It means that the homeowner doesn't get the benefit of net energy metering or any payment from or credit from the utility company for what he might send back, but it completely resolves the interconnect issue. I've been thinking about my black box approach, where you have a black box where the utility, using a paradigm of how much can it take on the circuit, can automatically turn off the flow of power from the homeowner to the utility. But this would be absolutely black and white. It would be absolute if you just don't take anything. And if you don't take anything, there are no questions about interconnect, no problems about too much on the circuit, and therefore all those 4,500 people, assuming they were governed by this, that is, you couldn't sell back to the utility, all these 4,500 people could be connected right now, today, right?
It's not that easy, Jay. It's not that quick and easy, because it's more complicated than that. And one of the reasons I think that solution is, shall I call it, suboptimal, is that, number one, it's still going to come at a substantial expense. Okay, that's pretty much a given. That it's going to be a substantial investment by the homeowner to pursue that non-export option. Second, it's really super critical that the expectations of the purchaser, of the consumer, the expectations of the purchaser be managed, so to speak. What I mean by that is, if they're paying, pick a number, $25,000 for a photovoltaic system that's going to be non-export, and salespeople being salespeople, they're eager to make sales, right? And that's not casting aspersions on their integrity at all, but this is a more complicated design, and typically salespeople, like I said, they want to make sales. That goes without saying.
Well, they want to make a spreadsheet that looks very attractive, and the spreadsheet doesn't look so attractive if you can't sell back to the utility.
Well, my point being, if you're spending X number of dollars and you are expecting a utility bill savings of, let's say I'm spending $250 this month, and for whether there's any basis in reality or not, if you're expecting that $250 to go to $25 or $50, and it only goes down by $50 or $100, then your expectations aren't being met. Then you're not going to be happy with your purchase. You're not going to be happy with your salesperson. You're not going to be happy with your PV system and the contractor that installed it. And having done this for as long as I have, I can't tell you how important it is, critically important, that you do everything you can as a contractor and a salesperson to manage those people's expectations. So,
well, not all contractors do that, I think, and a lot of people are walking around with spreadsheets that can never be realized.
Well, exactly. And again, when you're talking about a solution, a proposed solution, which is only providing PV power to a limited number of circuits in the house, 3, 4, 5, for example, then that solar energy, the surplus solar energy, has to go somewhere else. It can go into heating a coil in water and heating water, or it could go into batteries. There are different places it can go. But my number one concern would be that, again, a homeowner spending all this money and their expectation for the savings off of their utility bill, unless you really drill it home to them, that what can be expected, is that I think there is a strong possibility that their expectations won't be met and they will be unhappy.
Well, let me pose a possibility to you. I don't know what the demographics are, but let's assume that half of the 4,500 people who are being held up can't afford, say, $10,000 or $15,000 for, a battery technology in their homes, and that means that they can store energy during the day when the sun is shining and run off those batteries all night. Never really need to connect, and further, that they're willing to suffer the slings and arrows of being a battery owner. Nobody likes to be a battery owner, but if it's a choice of having the benefit of the spreadsheet or not, of having a dead system on your hands, then a lot of people are going to be willing to spend and able to spend $10,000 or $15,000 and have the battery and not be connected. Don't you think that a substantial number of people, assuming that the interconnect issue and the delay issue is not promptly resolved? I don't know what maybe the chances are better now that Alan Oshima's in office, but assuming that it's not promptly resolved, don't you think a lot of people are going to move in that direction? They're going to peel off some money. They're going to buy, batteries. Maybe the technology will get better even, and they're going to get off the grid simply to make the spreadsheet, come true.
I think that's unlikely in substantial numbers, Jay. I really do. And another thing that just came to my mind is that I'm going to estimate. Now, there's no way to get firm data to be able to back this up because we don't have a state agency that collects this data. But I'm going to put out there that somewhere around half, probably more, half of all residential sales, PV sales over the past, say, 1 year, 1 to 2 years here in our state has been through a solar lease or solar PPA. And that means that typically the homeowner is paying little, if anything, out of pocket to get a PV system on their roof and start saving off of their utility bill. Mm-hmm. So by going the direction of some type of hybrid system or non-export, at this point, to what extent that type of design, which again, in my one of the best words I can come up with is suboptimal, that how is that going to be considered by the likes of Vivint Solar, by the likes of Sunrun, Solar City, SunPower, Clean Power Finance, the bigger players in terms of third-party owned options for homeowners. And I know Solar City, of course, is very aggressive with Elon Musk there, the chair of the board chair there, in terms of pursuing not only PV companies that Solar City has purchased over the past several months, a company called Solivo based in California, but they're moving into New York apparently, but also the battery storage. Elon Musk and his supposed gigawatt battery manufacturing facility, which they announced with great fanfare is going to go in Nevada. So I know they're looking at it, but looking at it and actually having a product ready to roll next week, next month, 2 months from now are two different things. So it's going to be a much more limited market as far as those homeowners who are even willing to consider essentially kind of being guinea pigs and experiments in terms of how these systems will actually work and to what degree of satisfaction in the real world. I mean, as probably an overly cautious solar contractor who's been dealing with customers for a number of decades, I mean, it gives me cause for pause in terms of what I can expect in terms of actual performance as far as saving kilowatt hours and again, going back to managing customers' expectations.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's take a short break. Marco Mangelsdorf, Provision Solar, joining us from Hilo by audio with Skype here on the State of Clean Energy at the 12 to 1 block on Monday. We're talking about going off the grid, and of course we're talking about solar, which seems central in everything that happens around energy in Hawaii. We'll be right back to talk further about how people will deal with the delay and I guess the benefits of going off the grid. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Seymour Kazimirski. I host a show called Seymour's World on ThinkTech Hawaii. What is it all about? It's about you. It's about your experiences, my experiences, how we live life together. I'd like you to be my guest, listening in on what we have to say about today's world. Please be my guest on Seymour's World at ThinkTech Hawaii.
Okay, we're back. We're live. This is Jay Fidell here on ThinkTech, and we're talking about the state of clean energy with Marco Mangelsdorf of Provision Solar in Hilo by Skype audio. So I did want to talk about GEMS, which is the financing arrangement that Richard Lim and DBED came up with over a period of time. It sort of usurped the on-bill financing initiative, and now as of I think last week, middle of last week, the PUC has actually approved the issuance of 1.5, the program and the issuance of $1.5 million of, I guess it's ratepayer guaranteed bonds in order to finance energy installations, facilities, equipment, what have you, that may not be creditworthy otherwise. And my guess is that DBED, under his leadership, is going to try to sell those bonds immediately and before the end of this administration, and start deploying that money into, I guess, largely into PV. And I guess my question to you is, how does that affect what we've been talking about? Imagine $1.5 million, make that $150 million, my correction. $150 million into financing largely PV installations that may not be capable of interconnection. What happens with that?
Well, just to put it into dollars and cents figures, if I recall correctly, you and I and all other ratepayers across HEI territories, which is all the islands except Kaho'olawe and Ihau and the island of Kauai, will be paying an additional $2 per month per bill for money going into this GEMS pot. So it sounds like it's becoming a reality, and my initial hit is that having money wherever that source happens to be able to serve underserved market segments that aren't able to take advantage of PV. I mean, in principle, it sounds like a laudable idea, but I just keep on going back to, well, you can have all the money in the world and all the bonds in the world, but if you are not able to significantly increase the amount of PV penetration, PV generating capacity that the grid can handle, then so what? Doesn't matter. I mean, it really kind of putting almost the cart before the horse in terms of if we can't find a way collectively, if Hawaiian Electric can't find a way to accept more distributed generation, especially in the form of rooftop PV, then it doesn't really matter how much easier it may be for people who are underserved or at a disadvantage to be able to go PV, because there's no way to have a system that can interconnect. And as I think you mentioned when we've talked about GEMS before, is I mean, to me, there's some risk. I mean, the market does some things good and some things not so good, and typically since the crash of 2008, 2009, I mean, for better or for worse, I mean, credit is tighter these days because of the housing collapse, where you had people who were purchasing houses who really had no business in purchasing houses given their credit worthiness. So GEMS is going to be using essentially taxpayer-based bonds, right?
Yes.
To be able to provide money to people that were conceivably denied by the market. So that to me, I mean, how wise is that? I don't know. I mean, I'm not an economist. I can't come up with econometric equations to come up with some nice, clean, neat little answer. But I mean, I share your concern, if I'm not mischaracterizing your concern, about the wisdom of doing that.
Yeah, no, I think you properly characterized my concern. But you know, let me go a step further now. We have $150 million going into a market that is already well financed. Actually, you know, the problem in PV in general, in a statewide sense, it's not financing, because as you mentioned, all these mainland-based companies come in and they got all kinds of finance products for homeowners, and for that matter, condominium owners, where people can finance this off into the future, and just pay a very modest monthly amount, approximating their utility bill or less, using the finance products. It's great. So exactly what is $150 million on top of that going to do? And I guess, you know, where I get concerned is the $2 you mentioned, the fact that the ratepayers have to back up these bonds, the fact that this is being managed by a mainland company, not a local company, the fact that it's bureaucracy, it's huge bureaucracy, and all kinds of people will be getting jobs that will last a long time, and we won't be able to unravel it for a long time. As soon as those bonds are issued and that money is in the bank, this is going to be locked in, and the bureaucracy will be locked in, and it's really very questionable. So my question to you in our remaining time is, how does all of what we've been talking about affect the local industry? Because you sent me some numbers, and we have even stiffer declines going on. The local industry is consolidating, declining, being acquired by mainland companies. I mean, it's really in a state of rout. Can you talk about that, and can you connect it up?
Sure. Well, I mean, I've seen some recent figures in the press that have noted job losses there on Oahu in the solar contracting field to the tune of 2,000 to 3,000, which I don't know what the basis of those numbers are. It sounds to me rather on the high side, but whether it's 2,200 or 1,800 or whatever that exact number happens to be at any given moment. I mean, what's not deniable, what's very clear is that the photovoltaic industry locally, especially on Oahu, has gone off a fairly steep cliff over the past year or so, and I just kind of finished crunching numbers for PV permits on Oahu for last month, month of September, and the total number was somewhere around 500 for September, and compare that to the September of 2012, which was considerably more. So 500 in September of this year came out to only 24% of what September 2012 was. In other words, there was a 76% drop, September 2012 to September 2014. Compared to September of 2013, there was a drop of 63%. So we were only 37% of what we were September of last year. Year to date, first 3 quarters, January through September, for Oahu was down a little bit more than 50% total, 50% in terms of total permits during the first 9 months of the year. And now we're getting into, we are in the traditionally the busiest time of the year, which is September, October, November.
You get toward the end of the year and the tax credits and all that.
Exactly. And it looks like the trend of roughly 500-ish PV permits per month will probably continue for the rest of the year. And again, contrast that to I'll call it the halcyon days of 2012 at this time, when it was in the 2,000 range, 2,000 plus range per month in terms of PV permits. So it's
now you spotted this. You saw this coming even before it was, serious like this. And I guess the question is, what are the implications? One thing that comes to mind is if you knock off all those jobs and companies for that matter, is this the kind of thing which, can be recaptured? Is it sort of fluid, expandable when you need to expand it, and then it contracts when there's no business, and then it expands again? Or are these losses, what do you want to say, permanent losses to the development of clean energy in Hawaii?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I do not have a clear answer to that. I mean, it begs the question of what is kind of the natural cap in terms of if you have 100% of homeowners, what percentage of those 100% homeowners are going to go PV, either have gone PV or are possibly or likely to do so in the future? Right now, we have the highest ratio, the highest percentage, the highest per capita in the nation in terms of homeowners who've gone PV, roughly 1 out of 10, right? So it's unrealistic to think that we'll ever get to 10 out of 10. That's never going to happen for whatever multiple reasons. Is it 5 out of 10 is doable? Is it 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10? I mean, solar thermal systems, solar hot water heating we've been number 1 per capita for decades. But you drive around and you still see homes that don't have solar thermal systems on them. I don't know what the exact ratio is, but I know it's more than 1 out of 10. So, I mean, I just don't have an answer to what is kind of the natural cap, but I don't think we're there yet with 1 out of 10. And over the next couple of years, we've got multiple headwinds, I'll call them, that we're kind of sailing into. We've got, of course, grid saturation, which is the strongest headwind. We've got the federal tax credit, the investment tax credit, which is scheduled to go down from its present 30%, which we've had since 2005. It'll go down, if there isn't legislation to renew it, it'll go down to 10% by January 1, 2017, which is a little more than 2 years away. And in terms of what the state legislature is going to do next session or the session after that, as far as tinkering with the state tax credit, I've given up predicting, because I predicted last year at this time that they were likely to take it up this past session, and they didn't touch it.
Yeah.
So tax credits will play a big part in the equation as well. So
it'll pay. I mean, we have a couple of minutes left here, but let me circle back to the beginning of our conversation. Seems to me, see if you agree, is that the critical thing on all of this, including the condition of the industry and the future and expertise and jobs and all that in the industry, and its growth into financing products and other, tech devices that will, improve the way PV works. All of that depends on the grid. It all depends on getting better technology in the grid, doing storage at what you would call it, the enterprise level. And all of that somehow depends on the way HECO points itself now under Alan Oshima. So, if you want to look at a line going forward, it begins with the grid. The grid affects the amount of PV. The amount of PV affects the industry, and the industry affects how well we're doing in moving toward a statewide, level of clean energy. Thoughts?
No, I agree, and I think if Mr. Oshima goes in with the attitude of guys and gals, ladies and gentlemen, this is where we need to go, and I want to put us on a footing of we can do this rather than let's try to figure out why we can't do it. And for those people, those individuals in the company who are less enthusiastic, then it's incumbent upon them essentially to make a strong case as to why these things that need to be done can't be done. So I think again, you can only glean so much in a 26 or so minute interview that you had with Alan last week. But if he can changing the corporate culture at that type of bureaucracy is no mean feat. And I really think that that's part and parcel of what probably he needs to do. And I've seen this transition or this evolution from the likes of Mike May, who preceded Dick Rosenblum, and Bob Clark, who was the CEO before Connie Lau. I've seen a very interesting progression over the past 14 plus years, and I think there's a lot of people, you and I included, and a whole bunch of others, who believe that Hawaiian Electric is really at kind of a pivotal place in its history, where the status quo is even more impossible to continue with than it was ever before, and to what extent he and his chief lieutenants and executive management team are going to be able to affect change, real change in a company, in a bureaucratic culture that typically resists that kind of change. I think that's going to be absolutely key. So, how soon are we going to have indicators as to whether there's movement or whether there's pushback? I don't know, 6 months, 12 months. I think we should know something more definitive within the next half year to a year.
Yeah, what an interesting time to be alive and watching energy. It's not only the bureaucracy in the utility company, it's the bureaucracy around the utility company. All these structures are like 100 years old, and they're under all this pressure now to change, and they all have to change in their own way. And you and me, Marco, will follow it. We'll check it out. Every couple of weeks I want to have this conversation. I look forward to the next one. That's Marco Mangelsdorf, Provision Solar and Hilo, just back from China here in the state of clean energy, talking about the grid, going off the grid, and all manner of things connected therewith. Thank you so much, Marco.
Always a great pleasure, and what a fantastic way to start my week with talking with Jay Fidell on ThinkTech.
Xie and Sai Jin.
Xie.
Thank you, Marco.